Eli Walker hadn't spoken to another soul in 22 days. That's the kind of silence you learn to wear like a coat. Out here in the folds of the Wallowa Mountains, the wind did most of the talking anyway. He was checking a snare line along the ridge, same path he'd walked for years, when the first streak of red made him stop mid-step. Blood, dark, drying, caked into a trail of granite slabs that bordered his southern boundary. Eli stood over it, rifle slung across his shoulder, heartbeat steady but slower now. He crouched and touched the stain with 2 fingers. Still warm. His breath left in a slow cloud. No deer bled like that, not that high up. This was human. A heavy bleed uncontrolled. Someone was running for their life and losing the race. He rose slowly, every joint in his knees and hips crackling like cold branches. Then he followed. The trail dropped into brush and scattered rocks. Patches of blood darkened the pine needles and dirt. The mountain seemed to hold its breath. No birds, no squirrels, not even wind. 100 yards down the slope, tucked between a cluster of fallen logs and grass, tall enough to hide a deer, he saw her. She was crumpled on her side, one leg twisted, dress torn across the hem. Her face was streaked with blood and dust. She had one hand pressed tight to her ribs and the other clawed into the dirt like she'd tried to drag herself the last few feet before collapsing. Eli didn't move at first. His instincts screamed 2 things at once: help her and walk away. The second was louder. This looked like the kind of trouble that wore boots and followed trails with rifles. But then she looked up. Just for a second. Her eyes opened, flickered through pain and dirt, and locked onto him. Green, sharp, terrified. "Please," she rasped, barely louder than the wind. "Please don't take me back." That one sentence settled in Eli's bones like winter. Not screamed, not begged, just said, like truth. He didn't speak, just moved. He knelt slowly beside her, hands out, letting her see he meant no harm. Her breathing came in shallow shudders. When he slid an arm under her back, she flinched, muscle memory from something bad. "You're safe," he said, voice low and firm. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Eli scooped her up light as smoke. Her body trembled against his chest, soaked in blood and fear. She'd run far and hard, maybe for days. Her boots were barely holding together, soles cracked, laces snapped. The trail home felt longer than it ever had. Every snap of a twig behind him made him twist. Every silence sounded suspicious. But no one followed. Not yet. His cabin sat halfway up the eastern slope, backed against a rock wall and hidden by thick timber. He'd built it after his wife and daughter were buried under another sky, in another state, in another life. Inside, the fire was out, but the warmth lingered. He laid her on his cot, rolled up an old coat for her head, and got to work. She was conscious, but fading. He tore a strip from a clean flannel shirt and soaked it with water from the basin. Her wound wasn't clean, a knife or jagged bullet graze. Deep enough to bleed her dry, but not fatal. Not yet. When the whiskey touched the wound, she jolted. Her hand clenched, his wrist, eyes wild. "Easy," he said. "You'll live, but only if you let me help." He worked quietly after that. She never spoke again, just watched him like a deer too weak to run, but still ready to bite. He wrapped the bandage, secured it tight. Gave her water, sat beside her without speaking. The fire cracked once in the hearth, and she startled. Her fingers fisted the blanket. "Clara," she whispered. Eli frowned. "That your name?" She nodded once. "I'm Eli." She didn't ask anything about him. Smart girl. Outside, a raven croaked somewhere out of sight. The sun had dipped low. He pulled the rifle from its hook, walked to the window, and scanned the slope. He didn't see anything. That's what worried him. Back at the cot, Clara's breathing had steadied. Her eyes had closed, but not from trust, just exhaustion. Eli sat back in the chair across the room and stared at the fire. This wasn't the first time he'd found someone bleeding. It was just the first time in years he didn't bury them after. He thought about leaving her at the creek. Let someone else find her. But the way she looked at him, those words, "Don't take me back," they hit different. She wasn't running from jail. She wasn't running from the law. She was running from men. Men with reason to silence her. Eli reached under the floorboards and pulled up the trap door. The old cellar still held supplies and just enough space for a person to hide if things turned bad. He closed the hatch again and stood. Tomorrow he'd need to know more. Where she came from, who was after her, why. But for now she was breathing, and no one else knew she was here. He'd keep it that way. He looked out the window one last time. Then he saw it. Far on the ridge, too far to make out a face, but not far enough to miss the meaning, was a man on horseback. Just sitting there, watching. Eli didn't blink, didn't move. The figure turned, nudged the horse, and disappeared into the trees. Eli closed the shutters, latched them slow. He knew that kind of silence. He knew what it meant when a man didn't speak, didn't charge, didn't threaten. It meant he'd be back. "Someone saw us. You need to tell me the truth right now." Eli's voice was quiet but razor sharp. It was the kind of voice a man used when he wasn't angry yet, but when the wrong answer might turn him that way. Clara stirred in the cot, wincing. Her skin looked waxy under the low firelight, pale from blood loss. But her eyes found his face, and there was no confusion in them. Just calculation. She was awake, and she'd been listening. "I already told you," she whispered. "I ran. I didn't stop until my legs gave out. Someone sat a horse on the ridge tonight, watching us." Eli stood over her, now arms crossed. The rifle leaned against the wall behind him, but his presence was a weapon all on its own. Clara's lips cracked as she licked them. Was it one of them? Don't know. But they weren't lost. He paused. They weren't hunting elk either. She looked away, blinking slowly, and for a long time she didn't say anything. "Then they think I'm dead. I let them think it." Eli's jaw worked slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "I heard them say it," she continued. Her voice had picked up a bitter rhythm now, like she was pulling herself toward something dark but necessary. "One of them checked my pulse after I hit the ground. I was bleeding bad, but not enough to die. I held still. Real still. I don't even know how." "Adrenaline," Eli muttered. "Fear does things." Clara nodded faintly. "They left me there," said, "That's the last one." Then rode off. "You remember how many? 5. But I only saw 4 faces clearly." Eli let that hang between them for a moment. He crossed the room, pulled a tin cup from the shelf, filled it with water from the basin, and handed it to her. She took it with shaking fingers. "I don't know how far I ran," she said. "There were days, maybe 3, maybe 4. I passed out more than once." Eli rubbed a hand down his jaw. "Where was this A Ridge?" "North of Antelope Creek. The mine was supposed to be a dry claim. My father said it would barely pull enough to keep gas in the truck." Her voice cracked. "Turns out he lied." Eli's eyes narrowed. Clara saw it. "He didn't lie to us, just to keep us safe. He knew if word got out, If the company found out what we were sitting on, they'd take it. She nodded. They did. Eli exhaled through his nose slow. He remembered the land around Antelope Creek. Dusty, dry. The kind of place that always smelled like old ash and buried secrets. You're sure it was the company, yes. Her eyes were steady now, anger slipping through the pain. A man came 2 weeks before the attack. Nice boots, nice truck. Didn't shake anyone's hand. Said he worked for something called Dominion Extraction. Wanted to lease the land. Dad said no. Eli muttered under his breath. You don't say no to outfits like that. Not more than once. I guess not. Her voice broke for the first time. They came at night. No badges. Just guns and headlights. They said they were with the state. Claimed something about environmental rights. Then they shot my uncle in the yard. Eli turned away, giving her that one moment of dignity. He stirred the fire with a poker and let the flames climb higher. She kept going. My mother told me to run, so I did. I went out the back door and just kept running. I didn't take water, not even shoes. Just ran. Silence settled in the cabin like snow. Heavy, suffocating. Eli walked to the window again and unlatched the shutter slowly, just enough to peek out. The night was full, the stars sharp. No movement. But his gut said different. I need to know what they want, he said. Clara blinked. They want the land. Not just that. They want silence. That's why they didn't leave witnesses. He turned back toward her. You're the last loose end. She didn't argue. Didn't pretend he was wrong. He walked over to the trap door, nudged it open with his boot. You'll stay down there if I tell you to. Clara didn't reply. I'm not doing this out of kindness, he added. It's survival, mine, yours. I get it, she said. You really. She met his eyes. You live out here with nothing but a rifle, a shovel, and a locked door. You've been burned before. Eli didn't answer. Just closed the trap door again and sat on the edge of the table. The fire cracked, throwing shadows across the log walls. He watched her for a long time, and she didn't look away. Finally, she spoke. What happens now? Eli leaned back slightly. Now I make a decision I don't want to make. Outside the trees rustled. Not wind, movement. Eli stood fast, grabbed the rifle, and moved to the door. He eased it open without a sound and stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked under his boots. He scanned the trees. Nothing. Until something shifted near the tree line. A deer, no. The shape was wrong. He raised the rifle, sighted, held his breath. Then a voice came, low, smooth, too calm for the cold. You always did take in strays, Eli. The voice cut through the dark like a familiar ghost. Cooper Holt, Eli said. I figured you'd be here, Cooper replied, still hanging on to these woods like they owe you something. What do you want? Oh. A pause. Same thing you always did. Truth. Eli kept the rifle steady. You're with them, no. Cooper stepped forward into the half-moon light. I'm with myself. You working for Hensley, I'm watching him. Close enough. He's got folks scared, Eli. And scared people do dumb things. Eli didn't lower the rifle, like killing a family in their sleep. That wasn't me. Cooper's voice had a ragged edge. I didn't pull a trigger. I didn't even show up until after. You still rode with them. Cooper took another step. And you're still hiding from everything that burns. Eli's finger twitched near the trigger. You don't need to do this, Cooper said. I'm just scouting, giving you a heads up about what they're moving in. 3 days, maybe less. They think she's alive, and they know you're the only man in these parts dumb enough to take in a bleeding stranger. Eli narrowed his eyes. You came here to warn me. I came here because I owe you. That's all. Cooper backed up slowly. And because I know what you're capable of when the right lines get crossed. Then he turned and walked back into the trees. Eli stood still until the silence swallowed everything again. Back inside the cabin, Clara hadn't moved, but her eyes were wide now, staring toward the door. Who was that, she asked. Someone who's already chosen his side, Eli said, even if he pretends he hasn't. What do we do now? Eli knelt by the fireplace and opened a weathered chest. Inside was a worn revolver, a box of shells and something wrapped in oilskin. He handed her the revolver. We wait. But next time, if someone knocks... He paused. Clara nodded slowly. I won't be lying down. Eli closed the lid of the chest and stood up. Outside, the sky was turning silver blue. Dawn was coming, and so was trouble. The mark was shallow but deliberate. 2 diagonal slashes carved into the cedar tree by the creek, one crossing the other at a hard angle. Eli stared at it, jaw tight, thumb running along the wood grain. It was a signal, old habit from old days. Cooper's way of saying, I'm not done yet. Eli knelt beside the base of the tree, scanned the ground for boot prints. He didn't need to look hard. There were 2 sets, one leading in light and careful, and one leaving heavier, wider spaced. Not running, not quite walking either. He's circling. Eli rose, adjusted the strap of his rifle, and moved back uphill. He walked with that same silent purpose he'd carried since he was 16, when his father taught him to track elk before the war, before his daughter, before the things that cracked his soul in places no one could see. Back at the cabin, Clara was sitting up, legs hanging over the side of the cot. She looked pale, lips drawn tight, but the color was coming back to her face. The revolver sat on her lap. She looked up as he stepped inside. You were gone longer than I liked. I wasn't gone long. That's not what I said. Eli raised an eyebrow. He respected the fire behind that answer. There's a mark on the cedar down by the creek, he said, shutting the door behind him. Means Cooper Holt's still sniffing around. Her shoulders tensed. Friend of yours used to be. Then I'll rephrase. Should I be worried? Eli poured a tin of water and handed it to her. Cooper's not the kind that gets his hands bloody unless there's no one else around to do it for him. But he's loyal to money. And Dominion's got deep pockets. He nodded once. Clara shifted the blanket on her lap, uncovered the weathered leather notebook she kept tucked against her side like a second skin. I want to show you something. Eli pulled a chair closer, sat down slow. This belonged to my father, she said. He was meticulous. Wrote everything down, mineral reports, maps, even the date we struck silver and the depth of the vein. She flipped to a marked page. The handwriting was tight, controlled. He knew someone might come for it one day. But he also believed in proof, solid proof. Eli scanned the numbers, the notations. He didn't need to read all of it to know what he was looking at. This was the kind of paper a court might ignore, but a company like Dominion would burn a house down just to keep it from surfacing. This ledger, Clara continued, voice steady now, is why they want me dead. Not the land, not just the story. This. Eli leaned back in his chair. You still pick your fights with ghosts, Eli. Cooper's voice from the night before echoed in his mind. Let me guess, Clara said, watching his expression. You're thinking this isn't your fight. No, he said. I stopped thinking that when you bled all over my porch. She gave him a dry smile. So what now? Eli stood, paced once, twice. His boots thudded lightly against the pine floor. They're moving fast, he said. And they'll come here again. With more than just questions. And you think Cooper'll be with them, he might not pull the trigger, but he won't stop the man who does. Clara closed the ledger and held it to her chest. You think I should run? I think you should live, he said. Running's part of that. She didn't respond right away. Then she whispered, I've been running since the second that bullet hit the porch beam above my head. And I'm tired, Eli. He looked at her. You don't get to be tired until it's over. She gave a hollow laugh. Then I'll die tired. He looked out the window. The light was starting to soften into gold. Late morning, maybe early afternoon. The shadows were shifting, elongating. I know someone, he said. If she's still in the valley. Who, May Dawson? Clara raised an eyebrow. Sounds like trouble. She is, but the kind that'll put a bullet between someone's eyes if she believes in the reason. He grabbed his coat, threw it over his shoulder, and picked up his saddlebag. I need to talk to her. If there's a way to move you safely, she'll know it. And if there isn't, then we dig in. He turned toward the door. I'll keep the gun close, Clara said. Eli paused. Shoot to kill, not to scare. I'm not scared, she replied. He gave her one look, part pride, part warning, then stepped outside. The trail to May Dawson's place wasn't one most people took unless they had reason. It wasn't marked. It wasn't easy. And May liked it that way. She lived about 10 miles west, tucked between the arms of the mountain, where the creek split into two narrow runs. Eli rode hard, kept his eyes moving. Every crow call made him glance up. Every broken branch tightened his grip on the reins. He reached her place just as the sun started dipping behind the ridge. The cabin was smaller than his rougher, with hides stretched across the outer wall, and an old hunting bow hanging above the door. Smoke curled from the chimney. He knocked once. No answer. Then he heard the distinct click of a rifle. You look like hell, Eli, came a voice behind him. He turned slowly. May Dawson stood 10 feet away, boots, muddy coat, frayed hair, and a loose braid. Her rifle pointed just off his chest, not quite aimed, but not lowered either. That any way to greet company, he asked. That depends if company brings good news or a dead girl. She's not dead, he said. May blinked. Then she's the reason they've been sniffing up and down my trap lines. Eli nodded. Dominion. Yeah. May whistled low. That explains the suits in the rental trucks. She's got proof, enough to bury them. May raised an eyebrow. You sure you want to be the man holding the shovel? I'm not holding anything, he said. Just trying to keep her alive. May lowered her rifle. Then you better come inside. The interior smelled of leather and dried herbs. A few pelts hung from the ceiling. May poured 2 glasses of something dark and strong, handed him one. She your kin? She asked. No. Why risk it? He didn't answer. May sipped. You ever get tired of saving lost causes? Eli met her eyes. Not when they're worth it. She gave a slow nod. All right. What's the play? She needs to get to Lapwai. There's a tribal office there that'll listen. May frowned. That's 2 days if we ride hard. Maybe 3 with a wounded girl, and we'll be tracked the whole way. I know. May stared into the fire. I'll ride out at dawn. Meet you halfway at the old ranger station by Black Elk Creek. We'll take the old buffalo trail less eyes. Eli finished his drink. I'll bring her. May walked him to the door. Before he mounted his horse, she grabbed his coat sleeve. Eli, she said, voice lower. You sure about this? There's no undoing what happens next. He looked up at the stars just beginning to appear over the treetops. I don't care what happens next, he said. Only that she gets there. He rode off into the dark, the air colder now, the trees closer. Back at the cabin, Clara was sitting by the window, the revolver in her lap, the ledger open beside her. She didn't move when she saw him ride in. Eli dismounted, boots crunching in the frost-laced dirt. He stepped inside and nodded once. We leave tomorrow. Clara jolted awake before dawn breath catching in her throat, heart thudding like hooves on dry ground. For a second, she didn't know where she was. The shadows on the log walls danced like they had teeth, and the cold air bit at her skin like something hungry. Then her eyes adjusted, and she saw the low flicker of a lantern, Eli moving silently across the cabin, slipping a roll of ammunition into his saddlebag. She sat up, pushing the blanket off with stiff fingers. I didn't scream, did I? No, Eli said without looking at her. But you were close. Clara pressed her hand to her chest. The dream was already fading, but the feeling hadn't gone. Blood, dirt, screams that cut off too soon. The fire was out. The air was sharp. The world outside the window was still but not quiet. The kind of stillness that warned of something coming. You packed everything, she asked. He nodded. Food, ammo, blankets. Enough to get us to the ranger station. After that, May takes the lead. Clara swung her legs over the edge of the cot, hissing as her wound pulled. Eli handed her a canteen. You'll ride, but slow. If it opens again, you'll feel it. You black out, we stop. But we don't turn back. I wasn't planning on it. He gave her a look. She matched it. 15 minutes later, they were saddled and moving the horses' hooves muffled in the frost-laced soil. Eli kept her pace steady, glancing back every few minutes, scanning the trees without seeming to. Clara rode hunched, both hands tight on the reins, her breath fogging in the cold. Her father had taught her to ride when she was 6, but the lessons didn't cover riding, while half-heeled and hunted. They reached the tree line near midday. The trail May had pointed them to was older than any road, a narrow buffalo run that weaved through thick pine and split around a dried-up creek bed. Clara leaned into her horse's neck, eyes half-lidded. Keep drinking, Eli said, tossing her a canteen. She took a swig and winced. Still tastes like leather and fire. Means it's working. By the time they reached the ridge, the sky had dipped into a bruised gray. Clouds gathered low, and the air smelled of old smoke. They found the ranger station tucked against the base of a granite outcrop, half hidden by brush. It looked abandoned because it was. Eli had stumbled across it years ago while hunting. Back then, it had been used by poachers to stash traps and skins. Now it would have to do. Clara dismounted with a grunt, holding her side. Eli caught her arm, steadied her. Don't push it, he warned. I'm not, she said. I'm just tired of being breakable. He led her inside. The floor creaked under their weight, but the walls held. There was a cot against the far wall, a rusted stove in the corner, and a cracked window with a view of the path below. Eli unrolled the blankets. We wait here until May shows. Clara sat on the cot and pulled the blanket over her lap. You trust her? I don't trust anyone, he said, but I believe in her aim. That got a thin smile from Clara. An hour passed, then two. Eli watched the ridge through a slit in the shutters. The silence outside was different now, denser, like the trees were listening. Clara broke it. There's something else you should know. He didn't turn around. I figured. She took a breath. When I ran from the cabin, I didn't run alone. That got his attention. There was another girl, she continued. Her name was Elsie, 14. Her family worked the claim next to ours. She was visiting. We ran together for a while. What happened, I don't know. We got separated near the ravine. I heard yelling. I didn't go back. You think she made it? I think about it every day. Eli said nothing. There was no comfort he could offer that didn't feel like a lie. Outside, a branch snapped. He was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, back against the wall. Another snap closer. Clara pulled the revolver from her bag, checked the cylinder with shaking fingers. Eli crouched low and moved to the door. He cracked it an inch. Wind, trees, nothing else. Then a whisper. You always did prefer trees over people. Eli stepped out slowly. Cooper stood near the edge of the clearing, rifle slung across his back, one hand resting on his hip. You bring friends? Eli asked. Nope. This visit's personal. That's what you said last time. Cooper's face was drawn, dark eyes sunken. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days and didn't want to. You're about to be surrounded, Cooper said. How many? 6 riders, 2 flanking 4 behind. They'll be here by nightfall. Eli didn't blink. You gonna help them? No, Cooper said. Not today. Why not? Because some women carry thunder under their ribs. Eli frowned. That means something, or are you just waxing poetic again? Cooper smirked. Means I watched her bleed and still crawl. Means I saw what they did and didn't stop it. That kind of guilt doesn't sit right. So now you're trying to wash it off? No. I'm trying not to drown in it. Eli looked at him hard. You planning to warn the others? No. But if you're staying, you better be ready. I always am. Cooper tossed a folded map to the dirt. That trail here, he said. It forks east a mile down. Follow the creek. It'll buy you some time. Then he turned and vanished into the trees. Back inside, Clara was pale but alert. What did he say? She asked. They're coming. Tonight. She didn't flinch. He gave us a way out. You trust it. I trust he wants to sleep again someday. Eli packed quickly, handed her a pouch of dried jerky and a flask. We ride soon. You up for it? She nodded slowly. What if we don't make it? We do, and if we don't? Eli looked at her. Then I make sure they never forget you tried. They left just before dusk, slipping through the fork Cooper had marked. The path was narrow and twisted, but it curved away from the main trail and hugged the creek's edge like a lifeline. They rode hard, and behind them, far up the ridge, the sound of hooves echoed slow, deliberate hunting. Mae Dawson stood like the mountain carved her, arms crossed, rifle slung across her back, hat pulled low over narrowed eyes. The light behind her was fading fast. Clouds rolled in heavy gray as ash, and the pines around them whispered with wind that hadn't decided which direction it wanted to blow. You look like a man who buried his fire, she said, eyeing Eli as he reined in next to her, and now it's burning back up. Eli slid off his horse boots, crunching against gravel. That obvious Mae shrugged. You wear your regrets like a second skin. Behind him, Clara dismounted, slower, stiff from the ride. Her hand pressed to her side, blood having soaked a fresh patch into the bandage, but she didn't complain. She just gave May a nod, calm, direct. May returned the look with a slight tilt of her head. Respect, if not trust. They didn't need pleasantries. Not tonight. This the girl May asked. Eli nodded. Clara James. I heard about what happened in Antelope Ridge, May said, eyes never leaving Clara. I thought it was another ghost story. Didn't think there'd be a survivor. There almost wasn't, Clara replied. May's jaw tightened. Well, that makes things simple. She turned and started walking toward a narrow trail hidden by moss and branches. We've got 4 miles through a box canyon. If we stay low, ride fast, we'll hit the second lookout before first light. Eli helped Clara back onto her horse. You good, I'll be fine, she said, gritting her teeth. They rode in silence. The canyon swallowed them quick, the walls towering like stone giants on both sides. Moss hung from ledges, and the sound of running water echoed low through the corridor. The pace was quick, tighter than Clara liked, but she said nothing. Every breath was a needle. Every jolt in the saddle sent a stab through her ribs. But she held. Eli kept glancing back at her, and May noticed. You ever think you care too much, she said, just loud enough for him to hear. I used to think I didn't care enough, he muttered. They made camp near a bend in the canyon where the wind couldn't reach. May set up a perimeter, tripwires strung with old tin bottle caps. Not fancy, but enough warning to matter. Clara sat by the fire legs, stretched blanket pulled tight over her shoulders. The flames painted her face in amber, but she looked drained. Hollowed out, but still burning. Eli cooked beans in a battered tin pot. May sat sharpening a skinning knife with long, even strokes. After a while, Clara broke the silence. You two known each other long? Too long, May said without looking up. Not long enough, Eli added. Clara smirked. That sounds about right. May finally looked over. He saved my brother once. Winter storm, 2007. Kid had wandered out trying to find a cell signal. Would have froze solid if Eli hadn't tracked him 3 miles through whiteout. Clara blinked. He never mentioned that. He wouldn't. Doesn't like people remembering he's got a heart. Eli stirred the beans. He also pissed himself halfway back. May laughed for the first time in days. It was short-lived. A pop rang out far off, muffled but sharp. All 3 froze. May dropped her knife, grabbed her rifle, and signaled Eli with 2 fingers. South Ridge, he said. Half a mile. Maybe a warning shot. Clara stood wincing. They found the ranger station. Eli nodded. They're behind us now. Closer than they should be. May moved fast. We leave in 10. No fire. No tracks. Within minutes, the camp was stripped, smothered, and erased. They rode under moonlight, hooves wrapped in strips of cloth to dampen sound. Every turn of the trail felt tighter. Every shift in the shadows felt watched. At the crest of a shallow ridge, Eli raised a hand. Stop. May pulled up beside him. What is it? He pointed down the trail. Hoof prints. Fresh. Still crumbling at the edges. Someone's ahead, he said. Scouts. Maybe, he muttered. But Cooper said 6 were behind. Clara caught up. You think he lied? No, Eli said. I think someone else is out here. Not part of the main group. May cursed under her breath. They're trying to pinch us in. Which means, Eli added, they know exactly where we're headed. May looked at him. We can cut east. Loop through the ghost path. Clara frowned. What's the ghost path? May answered. Old Nez Perce Trail. Barely there anymore. Not even on maps. No one uses it 'cause it runs through a ridge slide rocks fall like they've got a grudge. Sounds cozy, Clara said. It'll save us 12 hours and break their line. But you have to ride like the devil's chewing your boots. Clara glanced at her horse, then back at Eli. Let's ride. They didn't stop again until the trees began to thin and the stars got brighter. The air smelled dry, brittle like stone baked too long in sun. They entered the ridge slide just past 3 a.m. The trail was barely more than a suggestion shale and sand shifting under every hoof. Below them, 100-foot drop waited with open arms. May went first. Her horse moved like it had done this before. Eli followed, one eye on Clara, who gritted her teeth and leaned into the slope, gripping the reins tight. Halfway through, a rock gave way under Clara's horse. It slipped, screamed. Hooves scraped stone. Eli was there in seconds, grabbing the reins, steadying the animal before it could go over. Clara's face was white knuckles blue. I've got you, he said, voice low and calm. The horse steadied. Clara didn't speak. May looked back. Everyone alive. Barely Eli answered. They cleared the ridge just as first light broke over the canyon. The trail opened into a small glade, mossy and wide enough to rest. May dismounted, stretched, and took a long breath. We'll rest here for an hour, then move. Clara dropped from the saddle and sat heavily against a stump head in her hands. Eli pulled a canteen, handed it over. Still good, he asked. She nodded. I just never knew how long a night could be. Eli sat beside her. You learn, or you don't make it. May walked to the edge of the glade, eyes scanning the ridge behind them. They're not far, but they won't risk that slide. We've got a gap. For how long? Clara asked. Not enough, May muttered. She knelt, drew a crude map in the dirt. 2 ridges north, then Lapwai Valley. We hit the tribal line, we get help. Eli nodded. Then that's where we're going. Clara looked between them. What happens if they beat us there? Eli stood slowly, jaw tightening. Then we don't stop riding until one of us is dead. May dusted off her hands. Better hope it ain't us. The wind shifted hard near noon, sweeping up grit and dry needles, as if the mountain itself had a message to send. Eli crouched low at the edge of a bluff, 2 fingers pressed into a patch of disturbed earth. Dust rose with every brush of air. But what caught his eye wasn't just the prints. It was the way they sank deep into the soil, too heavy to be scouting horses. He stood slowly, wiping his hand on his jeans. New riders, he muttered. May joined him, squinting into the light. You sure they're not ours? Eli shook his head. Too wide. Fresh shoes. Moving fast. And see that he pointed at a subtle break in the brush below. They're cutting toward the valley mouth, trying to choke us before we hit the border. Clara sat nearby under the lean of a rock, cradling her ribs. Her lips were pale again. She hadn't complained once all morning, but her silence was louder than words. She looked up. Can we go around them? Eli turned toward her. Not without losing half a day. And we don't have half a day. May sighed. They're boxing us in. They've done this before. That's not what worries me, Eli said. What does? Clara asked. Eli scanned the trail again. They're not being sloppy. They're not rushing, which means they think they've already won. Clara's gaze dropped to the dirt. The ledger she carried in her satchel felt heavier by the minute. Proof didn't mean much if you were dead before you could speak it. Eli moved back to his horse and began cinching the saddle tighter. May followed. You thinking what I think you're thinking. If we stay high, we can loop around that lower bluff, he said. Come down on the valley's edge instead of riding straight into it. That's goat country, she warned. It's also not on any map. May hesitated. Clara can't ride that slope. She won't, Eli said. She'll walk it. I'll stay with her. May turned to Clara. You good for that? Clara stood shaky but upright. I didn't come this far to get buried 10 miles from the truth. May cracked a grin. There's fire in there, just hidden under all that blood. As they prepared to move, Eli walked back to the spot where the trail turned to dust. He crouched again, touched the earth. Dust speaks louder than footprints, he said under his breath. What was that? Clara asked from behind. Eli stood eyes still on the horizon. It means they're close. And they're not just chasing. They're hunting. May finished. They pushed into higher ground, the trail turning rougher, rockier. Trees thinned, replaced by jagged slopes and switchbacks barely wide enough for a mule. Clara moved slow but deliberate, one step at a time, sweat beading across her forehead. Eli never strayed more than a foot from her side. Below them, through breaks in the trees, they could see the shadow of riders, black specks against golden brush cutting across the open valley, like wolves closing in on a wounded deer. They're fast, Clara muttered. They don't have to find us, Eli said. They just have to wait. By late afternoon, they reached a natural outcrop, flat stone wide enough to rest. May scouted ahead while Eli unpacked what little water they had left. Clara leaned against a rock, eyes half shut. When we get there, she said, what happens? Eli handed her the canteen. We hand over the ledger. We give a name. We make it loud enough the law has to listen. Do you believe that? He paused. I believe they can't bury what everyone already heard. She nodded slowly. Good. Because I'm not leaving it behind. Eli looked at her, brow furrowed. Even if it means dying with it. Her voice didn't shake. I'd rather die with it than live knowing I walked away. A gust of wind carried voices from below, faint but real. Riders, getting closer. May returned with urgency in her step. We've got a problem, she said. Eli stood. How bad? They're ahead of us. 2, maybe 3 already made it to the North Trail. That's the way down into Lapwai, Clara said. May nodded. They're waiting for us to come through. Eli looked at the ridge behind them. Then we go higher. May raised a brow. There is no higher. Just the rim. No trail. No cover. No water. We'll make it work. Clara took a deep breath and pushed herself to her feet again. Let's move. They climbed. For an hour, the world became nothing but stone heat and breath. Clara stumbled once, caught herself. Blood soaked through the lower side of her shirt again, and Eli saw it, but said nothing. He knew better than to try to slow her down with sympathy. At the ridge, they reached a small grove of wind-warped pines. From here, they could see the whole valley. Lapwai sat in the far distance, a smudge of smoke and buildings wrapped in hills and fields. It looked close. Too close to lose now. Below them, they saw the ambush waiting. 3 riders spread wide. Looking up, guns ready. May cursed under her breath. That's not a trap. That's an execution. Eli watched the angle of the sun. They don't know we're up here yet. So we take the drop, May asked. Eli nodded, hard and fast, right into the trees behind them. Clara stepped forward. And if we don't make it, you let me worry about that. May turned to Clara. You ride in front. I'll cover the rear. What about you? Clara asked Eli. I go through the middle. They mounted again. Eli looked down once more, watching how the dust swirled behind the riders, like shadows stretching. They're cocky, he said. Let's remind them why that's dangerous. When they dropped into the descent, the air seemed to split. Hooves pounded into stone. The slope blurred beneath them, and the trees screamed past. One of the ambushers looked up too late. May's rifle cracked first, dropping the left rider clean off his saddle. Eli veered right, drawing fire. His own rifle barked once, then twice. Clara tore through the center, ducking low, her horse wild with fear, but flying. The third man tried to cut her off, but Eli slammed into him shoulder to shoulder, knocking him clean over. Then they were through. Trees swallowed them and gunfire echoed behind, but it faded with distance. They rode until the world flattened, until the trees opened to a wide, dry meadow. Eli called out, "Stop!" All three pulled up, gasping. Clara's hair was soaked in sweat, her face ghost white, but she was upright. May looked back. They'll regroup, maybe an hour behind us. Eli nodded. That's enough time. For what Clara asked. To find a place they don't expect us to go. May cracked a smile. You got one of those. Eli turned east toward an old bluff line barely visible in the dusk. I know a place with a cellar and a back wall nobody's breached in 50 years. Clara raised an eyebrow. What is it? An old trading post. Burned out, but the bones are strong. May adjusted her saddle. They'll follow us. You know that. I'm counting on it, Eli said. They rode on as the sky bled orange and the dust behind them started rising again. The abandoned trading post stood like a ghost in the canyon. Half-collapsed roof, blackened beams, and stone walls still holding on as if memory alone kept them standing. Ivy climbed the left side, clinging to cracked mortar, and wind moved through the broken windows like it remembered something worth whispering. Eli dismounted, first moved through the structure, like a man retracing old steps. His boots stirred dust thick enough to coat a decade of silence. In one corner, an old stove lay rusted and useless. In another, a cellar door, nearly hidden beneath a warped floorboard, sat flush with the ground. He knelt beside it, pulled it open with a grunt, and peered into the dark below. Still solid, he muttered. Clara and May entered behind him, silent, weary. They'd ridden hard, harder than any of them should have, and it showed. Clara's face was pale and slick with sweat. May's eyes were sharp but tired. Neither woman said much. Eli lit a lantern and passed it to Clara. You'll stay down there if shooting starts, he said. I'm not hiding, Clara replied, voice like sandpaper. It's not hiding, he said. It's surviving, and it's helping us win. She hesitated, then nodded once and took the lantern. While Clara made her way down, Eli and May began barricading the post. They pulled broken shelves across windows, moved the old stove in front of the main door. May laid out a cloth with 4 weapons oiled and checked ready. We've got 2 approaches, she said. Main path and creek bed. If they're smart, they'll split. Eli nodded. If they're overconfident, they'll bunch up. Try to storm it fast. May loaded shells into her rifle. Which would you prefer? I'd prefer they turned around, he said. But I'll take stupid over patient any day. They worked in rhythm. No wasted movement like they'd done this before, because they had. Different places. Different wars. Same rules. Down in the cellar, Clara moved carefully, settling against a wall, the ledger clutched tight to her chest. She rested the lantern beside her, its glow casting long shadows against brick and dirt. Her heart still raced, and every breath came tight. To calm herself, she scanned the space. Shelves lined the back wall, empty now except for a rusted tin and a half-rotted crate. But in the far corner, something caught her eye. A book. She crawled toward it, dragging the lantern closer. The cover was curled and water-stained, but still legible. A ledger. She opened it carefully, fingers trembling. Inside were columns of names, dates, weights, and then something else. Letters, handwritten, stuffed between pages. She pulled one free and read, "To anyone who finds this, know that they lied. The land was never theirs. They paid the sheriff to forge the deed, and when my brother tried to tell the truth, he disappeared. I am writing this from a cellar I don't expect to leave. But if someone finds this, please make it count." It was signed only with the name M. Callahan. Clara sat back, stunned. "Someone else tried," she whispered. "Someone tried before me." She pressed the letter to her chest. Some fires burn wood. Others burn choices. She understood that now. This was never just about her family. It was about something bigger, older. A pattern of silence and blood. A system that survived because people like Monsieur Callahan had no voice and because, when they screamed, no one listened. Not this time. Above, she heard boots move across the floor. Eli stepped to the cellar door. "You all right?" "I found something," she called up. "Another ledger. Another story." "Bring it." She climbed out and handed him the letter. He read it slowly, eyes narrowing as the words sank in. May read it over his shoulder. "Well," she said, "guess we're not the first to stand here." Eli folded the letter and tucked it into his coat. "But maybe we'll be the last." May looked out the window. Dust on the horizon. 10 minutes, maybe less. Eli turned to Clara. "You hide when I say hide." Clara gripped the revolver tighter. "And if you fall—" He didn't answer. The sun had nearly set when they came. 5 riders spread in a shallow line. Guns slung, faces hidden behind dust masks and wide-brimmed hats. The lead man rode taller, broader. A scar ran from temple to chin, and he didn't bother hiding it. Randall Hensley. He reined in just 20 yards from the door. "Eli Walker," he called out, voice slick and slow like spilled oil. "Heard you've been playing shepherd." Eli stepped into the doorway, rifle at his side. "I play what I want," he said. "You're trespassing." Hensley chuckled. "This land hasn't belonged to anyone in 20 years. Burned out. Dead wood. Same as you." Eli didn't blink. "Funny. It's still standing." Hensley motioned to the others. 2 split off, flanking wide. 1 moved toward the creek. 1 held back. May fired first. Her bullet clipped the front rider's shoulder, spun him out of the saddle. Gunfire erupted. Eli dropped low, returned fire, hitting the edge of a rock where 1 rider had ducked. The man flinched back. May ducked under a window and reloaded in 2 quick motions. Inside the cellar, Clara held her breath. Shots cracked the air like dry branches snapping. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. A round punched through the front door, burying itself in the stove. Eli moved like a ghost, quiet, brutal, calm. He fired once, twice. 1 man dropped behind a tree. May called out, "They're pulling back," but Eli didn't relax. "It's a feint." Sure enough, 2 shadows moved around the far side. May turned to cover them, but her rifle jammed. Clara heard it all. Without thinking, she climbed out of the cellar, low and fast. "Get back down," Eli shouted. She didn't listen. Instead, she slid the revolver from her belt, moved to the corner window, and waited. The first rider burst from the side expecting cover. Clara fired. The bullet caught him in the shoulder. He screamed, staggered, and dropped his weapon. May finished him with a shot to the leg. The last man hesitated. Eli stepped into the open. "I wouldn't," he said. The man looked between them, dropped his rifle. Silence returned. May exhaled. "That all of them know," Eli said. "Hensley's still breathing." They moved outside together, Clara trailing close. Hensley lay against a boulder, bleeding from a graze along his ribs. His hand twitched toward his belt. May kicked it aside. Eli knelt. "You came here to bury a secret." Hensley spat blood. "You think this ends anything? You kill me, someone worse takes my place." Eli looked at Clara. She held up the letter. "Maybe, but this time the story gets told." They rode into Lapwai as the first burn of sunrise cracked the horizon orange, bleeding into gray like the edge of a wound that never closed. Clara hadn't spoken much since the skirmish at the post. Her side ached every time the horse shifted beneath her, and her hands trembled slightly against the reins, though she kept her back straight. The letter from the cellar pressed against her chest inside the satchel close to the other ledger, two voices from two generations, both written in fear and meant to survive it. The quiet hung heavy until they reached the top of a long slope. From there, they could see Lapwai stretched out in the soft light. Simple homes, a water tower, a radio antenna rising above the sheriff's station. Smoke curled from a few chimneys. The town hadn't changed much. May reined in beside Clara, still breathing. "Barely," Clara muttered. Eli stayed a few paces ahead. His eyes swept the streets like he expected trouble to be waiting with open arms. He didn't trust peace, not when it arrived so quickly after violence. At the bottom of the hill, they passed the first house. A man in coveralls leaned on a shovel watching them go by. He nodded at Eli, then narrowed his eyes at Clara and May. Word would travel faster than footprints. Outside the sheriff's office, Eli dismounted and tied his horse. He helped Clara down. She didn't protest. "What if no one believes me?" she asked softly. Eli looked her dead in the eye. "Then we make them." He stepped past her and opened the door. Inside, the room was still and warm. Sheriff David Running Bear sat behind the desk, cleaning a Winchester with care. He looked up as they entered, eyes narrowing at the sight of Eli first, then widening slightly when he saw Clara pale and shaking with dried blood on her shirt. He stood. "Walker. Sheriff." "What's this?" Clara stepped forward. "My name is Clara James. My family's dead, and I know who did it." David looked from her to Eli, then to May. "All right," he said, setting the rifle down. "Let's sit." They moved to a side table while David poured black coffee into 3 chipped mugs. Clara placed the ledger on the table, then the letter from the old trading post. "I don't know where to start," she admitted. "Start with what you saw David said. I'll do the rest." Her voice shook for the first 5 minutes, then steadied. She told him about the mine, the offer, the threats, the night the men came, the fire, the shooting. She told him about the running, the bleeding, the hiding. She showed him the names in the ledger, the notations about the ore levels, the date-stamped survey signed by a geologist from Missoula. David listened in silence. When she finished, he said nothing for a full minute, just stared at the pages in front of him, like they might catch fire if he looked too hard. Then he stood. "I've got a radio," he said. "We're going to call in federal eyes. Tribal land means jurisdiction. They'll listen." Clara looked up, dazed. Just like that, he said. Not just like that. But they'll come. May leaned against the wall. We've got at least 2 riders still out there. Hensley's men. They won't give up easy. David nodded. I'll post deputies at the station. You'll stay here until they arrive. That clear? Clara nodded. Eli shifted. You trust them, David looked him in the eye. I don't trust anyone, but I trust process more than silence. It took 3 hours for the first unmarked SUV to roll into town. 2 men in pressed jackets and tired eyes stepped out, one with a notepad already in hand, the other scanning the street like it might bite him. They listened to Clara's story again, asked questions this time. Dates, names, timestamps, motive, paper trail. They copied the pages, photographed her bruises, took the letter from the cellar and logged it with a yellow toe. One of them, Agent Stroud, rubbed his jaw when she finished. This is enough, he said, to open a case, but you'll need to testify. Clara didn't blink. I didn't survive all this to stay quiet. May nodded slightly, arms crossed. The agent stepped outside to make calls. David returned with fresh coffee and word that the mayor had been notified. Eli stared out the window, watching the wind move through the street. Trouble's still coming, he said. May joined him. You think they'll ride into a federal investigation? They won't know it's happening until the cuffs go on. What about the rest? She asked. He looked at her. Which part? Your part. He didn't answer. That night they stayed in the upstairs apartment above the sheriff's office. 1 bed, 1 cot, 1 couch. May took the floor. Clara sat by the window long after everyone else had gone still. She watched the lights on the road. Every passing truck made her tense. Every echo from the alley below set her nerves on edge. Eventually, she stood and walked to where Eli sat in the dark. You don't sleep much, she said. I sleep enough. You've been through something like this before. He said nothing. Clara looked down. Why did you help me, he thought for a long time. Because when you ran, you didn't just run from something. You ran toward truth. And I've spent too long pretending I didn't know how much that mattered. She let that sit. Do you think it's over? She asked. No, he said. It's just beginning. In the morning, the tribal judge arrived. Clara met with him in the conference room. She handed over everything. The notebook, the second ledger, the letter, her own statement written in her neat, straight hand. By afternoon, Dominion Extraction's headquarters in Boise received a notice of formal investigation. By evening, the first arrests had been made in the county just west of Antelope Ridge. News traveled fast. That night, David handed Clara a file folder. Somebody from the press is asking questions. You decide if you want to talk. Clara opened the folder, saw her own name typed across the top. Not yet, she said, but soon. May stood at the edge of the room, sipping tea like it was whiskey. Eli packed his bag. You leaving? Clara asked. He nodded. For now. I thought you'd stay. He looked at her. You don't need me anymore. I still don't know what's next. That's the trick, he said. No one ever does. But now you get to decide. Clara stepped forward. I want you there when I tell the story. I will be. Promise? Eli hesitated, then nodded. I promise. He walked out into the cooling dusk. May joined him at the steps. She's gonna be all right, she said. Eli looked up at the stars. I know. They rode west away from Lapwai into shadows made longer by peace. But peace never lasted long. The storm rolled in quietly, not with thunder, but with hooves on hard-packed road, and the smell of a man who hadn't slept under a roof in days. Cooper Holt rode into Lapwai alone, dust-caked and rigid in the saddle. His horse limped slightly, a front shoe nearly gone. The man himself looked no better, face drawn, one eye swollen. Dried blood streaked across his collar like a warning. Someone else hadn't lived to deliver. He didn't go to the sheriff's office. He didn't stop at the store or the saloon. He rode straight to the steps of the boarding house where Eli had been staying since they returned. He tied his horse with a twitch in his hands, walked up the steps with the weight of a man who hadn't decided yet if he was friend or enemy. Eli opened the door before Cooper knocked. They stared at each other for a long second. Cooper broke it. "You always did have good ears. You always did bring bad timing." Cooper gave a crooked smile. "Ain't that the truth?" Eli stepped aside. "Come in. You look like hell." "I earned it." Inside, the light was dim, the table bare. Clara had gone to meet the tribal council that morning. May was out checking supply lines with David. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet Eli didn't trust anymore. Cooper dropped into a chair with a grunt. "You got anything strong?" Eli poured him coffee instead. "You're cruel," Cooper muttered, but he took it. Eli sat across from him, hands loose, not quite relaxed. "What's coming?" Cooper drank, winced. "Something mean. Dominion ain't going down quiet. You took their money, their land, and you lit a match on their secrets. That kind of power don't crawl away, it strikes back." "We're ready." "No, you're not," Cooper said. "You're posted up in a town with 6 guns, a local sheriff, and a girl who still bleeds when she breathes too deep." Eli didn't flinch. "Then tell me what I don't know." Cooper leaned forward. "There's another crew coming. Different colors, same leash. They're not after the claim. They're after her, and anyone who stood up for her." "You're part of that crew." "I walked away," Cooper said. 3 nights ago, after the ambush failed. They met in the high flats west of Elkhorn. New blood. Military dropouts. No rules. Just paydays. You hear a name, just a code, ghost hands. Don't know who he is. But the others, they say he's the one Dominion calls when they need messes buried in unmarked graves. Eli's face hardened. "You came to warn us." "I came because I owe you," Cooper said. "I saved your life once. Don't make me regret it." Eli stood and walked to the window. The wind had shifted again, coming from the west this time. A sign if he ever believed in them. "I don't plan to die in Lapwai," he said. Cooper set the mug down. "Then you better move." Eli turned. "And you? What's your plan?" Cooper's smirk faded. "Ain't got one. I figured I'd ride with you till this thing ends. One way or another. You switching sides?" "I ain't had a side in years," he said. "Just tired of looking in the mirror and not liking who looks back." Footsteps on the porch. Clara stepped in, cheeks flushed, eyes sharp. She froze when she saw Cooper. Eli held up a hand. "He's not here to hurt you." She didn't move. Cooper stood slowly. "Miss James." "You have a lot of nerve," she said. "I do," he agreed. "But I'm here because the people I was riding with, they crossed a line even I couldn't walk past." "Convenient," she said coldly. Eli cut in. "He says there's another crew coming. Worse than the last. Headed this way." Clara's face tensed. "Then what do we do?" Eli looked between them. "We take it to the council. Now. We don't wait for another attack. We make the first move." May returned that evening with word from David. Federal teams would be slower than promised. Paperwork. jurisdiction, bureaucracy. But she'd seen a few strange faces watching the edge of town. They were running out of time. The council met under the longhouse that night, 7 elders, 2 legal advisors, and 1 interpreter for outside press. Clara stood before them with Eli at her back and May at her side. She spoke slowly, clearly. She explained the new threat, the new names, the danger to not just her, but the land itself, the weight of the ledgers, the truth of what they meant. Agent Stroud, called in from his temporary post in Grangeville, confirmed the findings. Dominion's records were already under audit. 2 board members had vanished. 1 had turned up in Canada. But that didn't mean the company was done. It meant they were scared. And scared wolves bite harder. The council sat in silence for a long time after she finished. Then the eldest, Raymond Greyfeather, cleared his throat. "You've done what most wouldn't," he said. "You brought us the truth. But truth alone isn't defense. We need time. Time to protect what's ours." May stepped forward. "Then give us the tools. Deputize who you have to. Let us guard the border." Raymond looked at Eli. "You'll lead them." Eli nodded. "I will. You understand what that means." Raymond stood slowly. "Then so be it." They posted notices that night. Closed the road to all unknown traffic. Armed volunteers rode the perimeter. May set up supply caches in the bluffs and valleys nearby. Eli assigned shifts, posted lookouts, trained hands that had never held rifles for war. Cooper stayed quiet, but stayed. He slept in the loft above the stables. Clara didn't speak to him again, but she didn't ask him to leave either. 2 days passed. On the 3rd morning, dust rose on the west road. Eli watched it from the church steeple spyglass, steady. 3 riders, scouting. Not Dominion suits, not ranchers, not locals. "They're here," he said. By dusk, the full crew would follow. May loaded her rifle and looked across the field where volunteers dug into sandbags and barricades. "You ever wonder if this is how all towns die?" she asked. Eli replied without looking. "I wonder how many die because no one stands at all." The town of Lapwai held its breath. Evening fell slow, drawn out like a prayer whispered through the pines. Every window flickered with low light. Every porch held a shadow, too still to be empty. People didn't speak much, not out of fear, but because they knew words couldn't stop what was coming. Eli stood on the steeple of the old church, eyes scanning the horizon through a battered spyglass. The dust from the earlier scouts had settled, but he knew what came next. "They'll wait till night," he said to no one. "The kind of men who think fear walks better in the dark." Behind him, footsteps creaked on the narrow ladder. He didn't look until he heard her voice. "You always talk to ghosts?" Clara asked. "Sometimes they're the only ones listening." She climbed the last rung and stepped beside him. The wind tugged at her jacket and her hair danced in it, loose and wild. Below them, the town stretched out in soft shadows and low lamplight. Volunteers rotated at outposts. May's crew fortified the west road. Cooper had disappeared down toward the creek bend, likely laying traps or sharpening whatever edge he still had left. Clara leaned against the railing, eyes searching the distant black. "I used to think stories were told to remember people," she said. "Now I know some are told to stop them from being forgotten." Eli said nothing. He knew the weight in her words, knew it had taken her weeks to find the strength to say them out loud. She exhaled slowly. "When a woman survives fire," she said, "her voice becomes wind." Eli turned to her, that his face caught between tired and proud. "Then let the wind carry it." They stood there silent again as a single hawk cut across the twilight sky. Later, back at the main building, the town had converted into a temporary command post. May spread out a crude map on a long table. Cooper returned with fresh mud on his boots and blood on his shirt, none of it his. "They're about 5 hours behind the scouts," he said, pointing to a ridge just west of the mill ruins. 10, maybe 12. Some armored, a few high-end scopes, 150 cal mounted on a flatbed. Eli frowned. "How many exits do we have left?" May traced the edge of the valley with her finger. "South path through the basin. But it's exposed. They'd pick us off in seconds." "No running then," Clara said from the door. She didn't ask permission to speak. Not anymore. Eli nodded. "We make our stand here." Volunteers cycled in and out through the night. Farmers, old veterans, 2 high school teachers who barely knew how to load a mag, but stood shoulder to shoulder anyway. The town had never fought anything like this, but it had bled enough in silence to finally stop being quiet. At midnight, the moon dropped behind the hills and the dark pressed in heavy. You could hear the sound of it in the air. Dry grass brushing against itself, a rifle strap creaking a single boot scuff on gravel. Eli moved from outpost to outpost, checking positions. At one barricade, a young woman named Jules handed him a worn photo. Her father, a miner, killed when a shaft collapsed under Dominion management. "Make this count," she said. Eli folded the photo carefully and put it in his coat. "I will." At another point, Cooper waited in a foxhole with a scoped rifle. "Ghost Hands is with them," he said. Saw his patch. Bone hand in black thread. Eli's jaw tightened. "You sure as hell? He doesn't talk much. Doesn't need to. You ever seen him work once? Mexico border. You don't forget a man like that." Eli stepped back, his breath slow. Clara waited near the front line. Her wounds had healed into scarred tissue, but she still winced when she moved wrong. She wore her father's jacket now, kept her revolver close, and the ledger. It never left her pack. "You ready for this?" Eli asked. "I've been ready since they lit my house on fire." Down the valley a shot rang out. Then another. Then silence. May spoke into her radio. Tripwire on the second trail just went hot. Eli looked at the clock. 2:17 a.m. "They're here." The first volley hit the western barricade. Controlled bursts. Testing. Probing. Eli called positions. "Let them come in closer. Don't waste rounds." From the rooftops, return fire answered. The muzzle flashes lit the dark like lightning bugs. Someone screamed, but Eli couldn't tell if it was one of theirs. Ghost Hands didn't show himself at first. He waited. 5 minutes in Dominion's Mercs flanked from the north side faster than expected. May cut them off her team, pushing them back with Molotovs and old claymores dug from a Cold War stash no one had thought to check in years. Clara covered a retreat path, eyes steely, hand steady. Then through the shifting smoke and confusion came a sound, not a gun, not a boot, but something older. A whistle, sharp, precise. Eli froze. Cooper shouted, "That's him!" Ghost Hands emerged from behind a flipped truck dressed all in gray. His face was streaked with soot. His rifle was custom-built, matte black long barrel, a handprint embroidered on his chest. He moved fast with precision that bordered on supernatural. 3 shots, 2 defenders dropped. May's second-in-command, Jules, took a round through the shoulder. Eli pivoted. "Clara, get down." Too late. Ghost Hands fired at the church steeple. The bell cracked. Clara fired back. Her round missed, but not by much. Ghost Hands ducked behind cover. Eli rushed forward, sliding behind a wagon, barking orders. They pushed, hard. The town, battered and scorched, refused to give ground. By 3:30, the mercs started pulling back. Ghost hands signaled retreat. The town had held. Smoke drifted over the barricades like breath finally exhaled. Bodies were counted, wounds dressed. Some didn't make it. Jules would live. Barely. Clara limped across the field straight to the spot where Ghost Hands had stood last. He was gone. But his handprint was smeared in dust against the truck, fading. Eli joined her. "You did good," he said. "We're not done," she replied. "No," he agreed. "But we're louder now." And in the distance, sirens began to howl, not to warn, but to signal the arrival of something long overdue. Justice. The road to Boise stretched long and flat, bordered by brittle fields and slow-turning windmills. It wasn't the kind of road meant for change. It was the kind meant for forgetting. But Clara James wasn't riding it to be forgotten. She sat in the back seat of the government suburban, hands folded in her lap, the ledger box buckled in beside her like a child. May rode shotgun, silent except for the occasional side glance at passing trucks. Eli sat next to Clara, his framed, stiff eyes locked on the window, one knee bouncing. Nobody had said much since dawn, not until they saw the city. Boise rose slowly against the high desert, all glass edges and courthouse walls. Clara felt her throat tighten at the sight. Her mouth was dry, but she didn't ask for water. She had something heavier to swallow. Eli broke the silence. "They won't care until they're afraid." Clara turned to him. "Then I'll give them a reason to be." The hearing hall was colder than expected. Modern. Marble floors, high ceilings, fluorescent lights that drained all color from the skin. Reporters buzzed outside the doors, their questions sharp and useless. Clara ignored them all. Inside, she was led to a narrow table with a single mic. The federal committee sat across from her, but like judges waiting to decide what parts of the truth could be printed and what parts needed to be buried again. The chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. James, you may begin your statement." She opened the ledger, slowly laid it flat before her. "My name is Clara James. My father was Henry James. He worked land our family held for 3 generations. Dominion Mining wanted it. We said no, they sent men anyway." Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept going. "They came at night, shot my father, burned our home. I survived. I ran. I carried this ledger with me." She slid it forward. The chairman leaned in. "Are you alleging that Dominion Mining used force to unlawfully claim your land?" Clara looked him dead in the eye. "I'm not alleging it. I'm proving it." She pointed to the signed documents. "This ledger records altered land surveys, bribed officials, a geologist who disappeared after writing his report. The same geologist Dominion now claims never existed. His signature is on page 14. Murmurs spread behind the panel. One congresswoman leaned forward. "How did you survive?" Clara blinked. "By not stopping. By meeting people who believed the truth mattered more than comfort." She reached into her satchel, pulled out the second ledger, the one from the burned-out post. This belonged to another whistleblower, a woman who tried decades ago. She didn't make it. She placed it beside the first. Now she has. Silence hung heavy. May watched from the gallery, fists tight in her lap. Eli stood in the back, arms crossed, heart pounding like a distant drum. Cooper wasn't there. He didn't do well in cities, but his rifle had protected every step that led Clara to this room. The committee called a recess. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones and flashes like vultures circling a story not yet cold. Clara answered only one question. "What do you want now?" She looked directly at the camera. "I want them to stop pretending we don't exist." That night in the hotel room paid for by the state, Clara stared at the city lights. Eli sat on the balcony beside her, nursing a black coffee. "They'll try to twist it," he said. "Let them," she replied. "Twisting truth still leaves truth behind." He turned to her. "You know this isn't over." She nodded. "I'm counting on it." May joined them with a folder. "We just got word. 2 Dominion execs subpoenaed. FBI raids tonight. Offices in Phoenix, Denver, Spokane." Clara's hands trembled. Not with fear, with purpose. Eli reached over and stilled them. "You started a war," he said. She shook her head. "No. I just stopped letting them win it in silence." The city hummed below, unaware it had just witnessed the sound of something ancient breaking, not with a bang, but with a woman who chose not to be quiet. The first snowfall came late that year. It drifted in slow, scattered sheets across the Wallowa Valley, dusting pine branches and weathered roofs, with quiet gentleness, as if the land itself was learning to breathe again. Clara stood at the edge of her family's property, now cleared and partially rebuilt. The charred frame of the old house had been hauled away weeks ago. In its place stood the new foundation, simple, squared, strong. She ran her fingers along one of the porch beams, freshly sanded, still smelling of cedar. Behind her, voices echoed across the yard. Volunteers from Lapwai and other parts of the reservation were finishing up final details before winter hit hard. May barked orders near a half-covered pile of lumber. Eli knelt near the well, resecuring the pump with quiet precision. Clara's breath came out in clouds. "Didn't think we'd make it this far," she said aloud. Eli stood and walked toward her, dusting snow from his jacket. "Most don't. You think it's really over?" He squinted at the ridge. "No. But it's quiet. That's something." Weeks had passed since the hearings. Dominion Mining was in retreat, publicly shamed, stripped of contracts, facing multiple indictments. The FBI raids had turned up far more than expected: forged mineral records, slush funds, correspondence implicating state officials. Ghost Hands was still out there, but his name was now part of a federal watch list. His freedom had a clock ticking behind it. Lapwai had changed too. More patrols, more organization. People walked taller. There was pride in their steps that hadn't been there before, pride built on survival and the knowledge that their story had made it out of the dark. Clara's story. She stepped off the porch and walked with Eli toward the slope where wildflowers used to grow in spring. A pair of headstones sat there now, side by side. One marked Henry James, the other unmarked, placed for the woman whose ledger had survived decades in a cellar. Clara knelt, brushed snow from both. "You were right to keep writing," she whispered. "You didn't die for nothing." Eli remained silent, hat in hand. May joined them after a few minutes, arms crossed against the cold. "Word came this morning," she said. "Clara's been officially approved to reclaim the title on the land. Fully hers again." Clara smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It was always mine." May glanced at Eli. "We'll head back soon. You staying out here tonight?" Eli shrugged. "I like the quiet." May nodded and walked back toward the cabin, boots crunching in the snow. Clara and Eli remained. She still doesn't trust the quiet, Clara said. Neither do I, he replied. But I don't fight it anymore. They stood in silence. Then Clara reached into her coat and pulled out a folded newspaper. The headline read, "Whistleblower Testimony Spurs Largest Environmental Indictment in Northwest History." Below it, a black and white photo of her standing before the committee, chin high, eyes unflinching. Eli looked down at it. "You ever think you'd be the face of a movement?" Clara let out a soft laugh. "I used to be afraid of speaking in front of more than 3 people. He smiled. "Now they'll teach about you in law schools." "I didn't want to be remembered," she said. "I just wanted them to stop erasing us." Eli reached into his satchel and pulled out a worn leather notebook. He handed it to her. "What's this? Something I started after we left Lapwai. Notes, maps, testimonies. A kind of trail ledger." She flipped through the pages, eyes widening. "Eli, I figured we don't stop here," he said. "There are other towns, other stories buried beneath money and fear. We can help them speak." Clara looked up. "You want to keep fighting," he said. "I want to keep telling the truth. Let the fight be someone else's if they need it." Clara held the notebook against her chest. "You think we're ready for that?" "We weren't ready for any of this. But we did it anyway." They turned back toward the cabin as the wind picked up soft and steady. Inside, May was pouring coffee. Someone stoked the fire. Laughter echoed from the kitchen. Even Cooper's voice carried from the porch, where he whittled something out of pine wood with his usual scowl and half-interest. Clara stepped in and let the warmth wrap around her. She looked at these people, flawed, scarred, stubborn, and knew they were hers now. Chosen family. Truth-forged family. As evening settled, snow continued to fall. Outside, everything slowed. No sirens. No shouts. Just the hush of the land reclaiming itself. Later, as Clara sat near the fire, she wrote the final page in her journal. "The mountain remembers who bled on its rocks. And so will I. Not with grief, but with purpose. Because survival is not enough. The real act of defiance is building again, louder, stronger, and in the open. I am not a survivor. I am a voice. And this land still listens." She closed the journal, exhaled, and finally, after everything, smiled.